The report from the Wisteria Falls Police Department came in at 9:15 p.m., an urgent dispatch call reporting a missing juvenile. The initial details were terse and clinical, a sterile summary of a chaotic event. The caller, Arthur Vance, stated that his 10-year-old daughter, Elara, was last seen in her bedroom at approximately 9 p.m. This 15-minute window, a seemingly insignificant gap between the last sighting and the 911 call, immediately introduced a quiet sense of unease. It was a lapse in time that, while not immediately suspicious, would later become a point of scrutiny, suggesting either a momentary distraction or a deliberate withholding of information by a father whose account was the sole basis for the initial timeline. The family's home, a typical suburban split level in a quiet cul-de-sac, presented a picture of deceptive normalcy. The police log, in its initial assessment, noted no signs of a struggle or forced entry. The sole anomaly was a single, unlocked window in Elara's bedroom. This detail, the very first fact of the investigation, immediately complicated the narrative. A simple abduction theory relied on a forceful, external threat. The absence of such a threat suggested a more complex scenario. The story, from its very first moments, was not a simple crime procedural but a psychological mystery rooted in the internal dynamics of a family already on the brink. The lack of forced entry indicated that Elara either left on her own volition or that she knew and trusted her abductor, a conclusion that fundamentally altered the course of the police's subsequent actions. The arrival of patrol cars and the frantic search that followed transformed the quiet suburb into a scene of organized chaos. The initial search focused on the immediate vicinity, a standard protocol for a missing child report. Officers and volunteers combed the yard and neighboring streets, their flashlights cutting through the humid night air. The police report documented the first moments of the investigation with clinical precision. A missing 10-year-old girl, last seen in a yellow dress, with a height of 140 cm and weighing 35 kilos. This objective data stood in stark contrast to the emotional turmoil of the parents, Arthur and Evelyn Vance, whose distress was palpable even in the formal language of the police log. The open window remained the central puzzle piece, a silent testament to the fact that the girl's disappearance defied the most common explanations. A simple abduction scenario was already being dismissed in the minds of the lead investigators. This single detail served as the central narrative question: what or who was the true catalyst for Elara's disappearance? As the search for Elara extended into the following days, the small town of Wisteria Falls became a character in its own right. A local news report captured the collective mood, broadcasting images of community rallies, tearful vigils, and makeshift memorial sites overflowing with stuffed animals and hopeful messages. The media narrative was initially one of communal hope and solidarity, portraying a town united in its collective prayers for the safe return of a child. This powerful and archetypal story of a small town in crisis, however, was a fragile one. As days turned into a week with no new leads, the narrative began to shift. The public's initial empathy started to give way to a creeping suspicion. The town, once a symbol of support, started to embody a fragile trust that could easily fracture under the pressure of a prolonged mystery. It foreshadowed a natural progression from shared grief to finger-pointing and distrust, a transformation that would ultimately reflect the breakdown within the Vance family itself. The focus of the investigation soon turned inward, zeroing in on the family. Arthur Vance, in particular, became a subject of intense scrutiny. A psychological evaluation conducted by law enforcement confirmed a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, stemming from his military service. This wasn't merely a background detail, it was a foundational element of his character and a causal factor in the family's dysfunction. The evaluation noted his pervasive emotional detachment and inability to connect with his family. This numbness, a direct result of his unaddressed trauma, was perceived by his wife Evelyn as a profound indifference, as she would later describe in her police interview. This emotional chasm between Arthur and Evelyn was the direct consequence of his psychological state. His inability to grieve publicly or display the frantic emotion expected of a parent in his situation was not a sign of guilt, but rather a symptom of a deep-seated trauma that had long ago rendered him a stranger in his own home. This disconnection became the breeding ground for the turmoil that drove his daughter to her final, desperate actions. Evelyn Vance's perspective provided a crucial counterpoint to the official police narrative. In her police interviews, she offered a heartbreaking account of her husband's transformation. She stated that he had become a different person after his return from service, describing his distant nature and commenting on his striking lack of public emotion during the crisis. She noted pointedly that he didn't even cry. Her grief was inextricably linked to her suspicion of Arthur. She saw his emotional detachment not as a symptom of a psychological condition, but as a failure of character, a profound betrayal of their marriage and a source of her daughter's loneliness. Her statement was not merely a description of marital strife. It was a powerful narrative question. What specific event or unspoken secret had transformed Arthur? Her belief that a hidden event had fractured their family and contributed to their daughter's disappearance introduced the idea that the true mystery was not an abduction at all, but a tragic escape from a home where a child felt profoundly unheard and unloved. The investigation reached its definitive turning point with the discovery of Elara's private journal. Found tucked away in her nightstand, the small leather-bound notebook shattered every preconceived notion about her disappearance. The diary's entries painted a stark picture of a lonely and isolated child, one who felt increasingly overlooked and unheard in her own home. But it was the final entry that changed everything. In her own spidery handwriting, Elara detailed her plan to leave. She mentioned a new friend, a mysterious figure named Cora, with whom she had made a pact to run away. The final, haunting words on the page were a powerful declaration. Finally, I'll be able to leave. This discovery provided the irrefutable explanation for the lack of forced entry and struggle. Elara had not been abducted, but had willingly fled a life she could no longer bear. The narrative immediately shifted from a missing person case to a manhunt for a potentially dangerous accomplice, a figure who had exploited the girl's desperation for her own purposes. The discovery of the diary prompted a re-examination of the initial forensic evidence. The police report had previously noted the discovery of an unknown male DNA sample on the open windowsill of Elara's bedroom. Initially, this DNA was thought to belong to a potential abductor. However, in the context of the diary's revelation, it now took on a new and more sinister meaning. The DNA was now likely that of Cora, or perhaps her associate. The reanalysis also focused on a distinctive silk fiber found clutched in Elara's hand. This seemingly minor detail now became a vital clue, possibly linked to the attire or a personal belonging of the mysterious accomplice. In her bedroom, a final piece of evidence, a porcelain doll, was found shattered on the floor. While a simple, physical detail in the initial report, its destruction now became a powerful symbol. The broken doll, a representation of childhood innocence and domestic comfort, had been broken. It served as a visual metaphor for the psychological breaking point Elara had reached, a tangible representation of her shattered sense of security and well-being. The doll's state explained not just what happened, but why she felt the need to escape. The re-examination of Arthur's behavior, coupled with the new information from Elara's diary, led to the final, conclusive search operation. Following Arthur's footsteps, a specialized search and rescue unit descended on Wisteria Creek. The ground was damp, the black soil giving way under their boots as they meticulously combed the area. The search concluded not with the joyous reunion everyone had hoped for, but with a tragic finality. The operation uncovered what Arthur had been looking for, not his daughter, but a final message or personal item she had left behind. The full truth of Elara's disappearance was not a story of a predatory stranger or a simple family dispute. It was the culmination of a tragic series of events, a father's emotional numbness, a mother's misdirected suspicion, and a child's desperation to escape a home that felt like a prison. The discovery at Wisteria Creek revealed that Elara, in her final act of defiance and hope, had fled from a life she no longer felt a part of, tragically running from the very people who were supposed to protect her. Epilogue, Echoes and Aftermath. The Tragic resolution of Elara Vance's disappearance left an indelible mark on the town of Wisteria Falls. The collective grief and initial unity of the community were replaced by a somber understanding of the complex tragedy. The story of Elara's willing escape served as a haunting reminder of the secrets that can fester within even the most outwardly perfect families. Arthur and Evelyn Vance, their private anguish laid bare for the world to see, were left to navigate, a new reality shaped by loss, guilt, and a profound shared regret. The case was a poignant illustration of the devastating consequences of unresolved trauma, and the way a child's silent plea for help can go tragically unheard. Ultimately, the investigation concluded not with a criminal indictment, but with a more sorrowful truth. The girl was not taken from her home, but from her own family, and in her flight, she tragically found the final devastating escape she had always sought.